learns that he sucks at being a hero, and being a hero sucks too. But none of these villains, none of these opponents, not even the battle beast himself, teach Mark a lesson quite like Omni-Man does. When I say Invincible is a hero made by villains, you can take destination that the protagonist will find themselves at. For Mark, this is learning that no matter what he does, no matter how hard he tries, he will inevitably outlive everyone he loves. It's a tragic fate, but an unavoidable one nonetheless.
What's up, guys? I hope everyone's having a blessed day. As always, the best place for anime reviews, reactions, and breakdowns and analysis. Got another video for you on the show Invincible, and this is the genius way Invincible used villains to write a hero. Without further ado, let's get to the video.
About a superhero, so it should go without saying that in it are plenty of supervillains. Naturally, some are stronger than others, some are smarter than others, and some are certainly more likable than others. But when it comes to who makes a story better than the others, none of those traits even matter unless they're used to achieve one thing: challenging the main character, Mark. Of all the villains in the show, I found 3 that I believe do this better than any of the others, which is saying a lot because Mark is surprisingly easy to challenge. So I'm going to isolate each of the 3 villains, explain how they challenge unique aspects of Mark's character, and understand how they shape the story by making our hero
Invincible.
On my channel, I have this framework I call the antagonist drill. I bet my subscribers are rolling their eyes right now because I've explained it like 4 times already. So this time I'll try to do it in as few words as possible so we can jump right in.
Let's get it.
Antagonist drill help writer make bad guy who make good guy life suck. Basically, it's used to create antagonists that give the protagonist the appropriate challenge that will target something about their character. The first trait they can target is their abilities. Antagonists that do this are called obstacles. A well-written obstacle will make our hero understand what exactly makes them strong. When you go deeper, you target the protagonist's values. Antagonists that do this are called dilemmas. This is because they isolate things that are important to the hero and make them choose between them. The last layer is about targeting the hero's flaws, specifically the ones that they cannot change. I call these antagonists mirrors because they give the hero a good look at themselves and force them to see the bigger picture. And that's it.
I like this. Obstacles, dilemmas, and mirrors. I do really like this framework. I might have to steal this for future videos, but it doesn't make sense. Obstacles, to me, is like the external, how they challenge, how they use their abilities. If they have fire abilities, can they control them? How much output they can do? How can they overcome the fire ability? Their dilemma values, this is the internal aspect of the character. Do they challenge the way you think, you feel, how selfless they are, how selfish they can be, like those kind of villains. I put villains like Mahitov and the JJK villains in that example, and then mirrors. It's almost a reflection of how the hero can be a hypocrite along with just being a hero as well. Not every hero is great and perfect, but most heroes are flawed, and how the villain exploits their flaws to expose the weakness in the hero, what makes it so good, which is the thing what all Batman villains do with Batman. So yeah, I do really like this framework. Let's keep going.
As exhaustive as possible. There are probably exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, I truly think it encapsulates all types of antagonists. What's really awesome is that I made it before watching Invincible, and yet it perfectly aligns with the 3 main villains that the show's explored this far. But there is a slight twist. See, the reason I call my framework a drill is because you start from the most surface level traits of the protagonist and gradually dive deeper into what really makes them. I figured this is just the most logical path for a story to follow. But if you've watched Invincible, you know that what makes the story so special is how it breaks conventions. The way I see it, I think Invincible approached this framework completely opposite to the expected path. They took my framework, flipped it upside down, and said this is how we're doing it, pal. Yet I think it works perfectly. And obviously the writers didn't have the antagonist drill in mind when they were writing the show. But the point is that the framework works, just not in a rigid order, which is great because stories should never follow any rigid rules. So without further ado, let's explore Invincible's unique approach to villains and how they've shaped Mark Grayson into the character he is now. From the very first episode, we knew Invincible was a special show because we saw it had a very special villain. Nolan Grayson, better known as Omni-Man, is perhaps the show's single most interesting character. But the antagonist drill isn't actually about the antagonists themselves, and what Omni-Man does to his son Mark is what pushes all of the terrible, horrible, trauma-inducing dominoes to fall. One of Invincible is very mirror-coded. What I mean by this is that everything that happens exists to inform Mark about what being a superhero actually means. When he gets his powers in episode 1, he's thrilled. So the challenge he has to face is learning the full truth of what this entails. With each new episode, he faces harder and harder villains, gets beaten worse and worse each time, and fails to save more and more people. From the Flaxons to Doc Seismic to Sequids to zombie cyborgs, Mark learns that he sucks at being a hero, and being a hero sucks too. But none of these villains, none of these opponents, not even the battle beast himself, teach Mark a lesson quite like Omni-Man does. When I say Invincible is a hero made by villains, you can take this pretty literally because his biological father is a villain. But what I really mean is the way Mark changes in reaction to how Omni-Man challenges him as a textbook mirror antagonist. At the heart of a mirror antagonist is a truth that the hero can't change. And all season long, we the audience have been chasing the truth. We saw what it did to the Guardians of the Globe, we know the destruction he's capable of, and we're wondering what it all means for Mark. In the season finale, we learn it. In the first phase of Mark's confrontation with his dad, Omni makes the truth abundantly clear to him when he uses his indestructible body as a tool for mass destruction. I think the final death toll is over 2,000 people. Now, I'm not saying Mark caused this, nor am I saying that the Chicago incident is the inherent flaw Mark has to accept. What he does have to accept is the true, unforgiving nature that comes with his strength. The truth about Mark that he cannot change is that, unlike the humans he cares so deeply for, he is invincible. Sure, from the start, Mark knows he's super strong, but does he know? Does he understand just what that means? Doesn't think so he teaches him. In my video dedicated to mirror antagonists, I said there are two types of reflections that a villain could use to get their point across. I call the first one the illusion of color. See these two hearts? See how they appear to be different colors? Yet when we zoom in, we learn that they're actually the same color, just in different contexts. So when the illusion of color is used against a protagonist, it basically shows them that their truth isn't always so pretty. With Mark, he learns that the same power he uses to fight evil with can also annihilate the innocent. He learns that what he thought was a blessing is also a curse. The other type of reflection is something I call the illusion of choice. This occurs when an antagonist points out an inevitable destination that the protagonist will find themselves at. For Mark, this is learning that no matter what he does, no matter how hard he tries, he will inevitably outlive everyone he loves. It's a tragic fate, but an unavoidable one nonetheless. Whether he likes it or not, that's his reality, and Omni-Man literally pounds this truth into his skull. A point I've made before is that the lower you go down my drill, the more competent the antagonist has to be. This is because no matter what an obstacle's point may be, it can ultimately be ignored if the protagonist can just use their strength or wits to overcome them. If the protagonist is more competent than the antagonist, they can probably find a way to have their cake and eat it too. So for a mirror to even exist, they inherently have to be competent enough to not be ignored. And Omni-Man, yeah, he's one of the most capable characters in the entire universe. So Mark can't punch his way out of this lesson. One thing I will note is that I'm not saying Omni-Man's philosophy on...
want to pause. This is the first time I'm doing this creator, and I'm learning a lot, but I just want to add my 2 pence on this part specifically, because he's actually so true. At the end of the day, might makes right. So it doesn't matter if you shine the hypocrisy to people, shine the flaws about it, because at the end of the day, if you can just overpower the person who's reflecting that light on you and just effectively just destroy the mirror, everything they're saying means nothing at the end of the day, because you are stronger than them. It's like it's all well and good you saying calling hypocrisy out, but if I'm able to still beat you irrespective of that, your reason means nothing to me, because the thoughts of people weaken me have no effect on me. And it's also very clear in this very show of Invincible of how Mark is also a hypocrite. He's has the highest sense of morality compared to everyone else, especially Cecil in this current scene of, oh, you shouldn't use villains, oh, you should, they don't deserve redemption, oh, they did this and all that, and they've done mass destruction, they should be punished away forever or killed or whatever. However, he doesn't have that same energy for his dad, and the only reason he gets his way with it is because he's Mark and he's stronger. So because he has this power in his terms, the fact that he reflects the flaws doesn't matter because he's the strongest. So if he can overpower anybody who does reflect those flaws. So I completely agree with this creator. Very genius framework he's done. Learn him. I have to check out more videos of him. If you guys do enjoy this video so far, hit the like button, and I'll definitely do more videos of this content creator because it's quite exceptional.
Life is correct. I'm just saying he's correct about the nature of Mark's powers. As we see in the later seasons, Omni-Man's argument is actually really weak, and he's slowly changing it, which is great in its own right, but it's beyond the scope of what we're here for. My framework really only looks at antagonists as plot devices for the protagonist. Their entire character arcs are like a whole separate thing. In regards to Mark's unavoidable truths, Omni-Man does a perfect job at hammering that message home. Mark's clash with his dad is a perfect exclamation point for Season 1's message about how this superhero story won't be all sunshine and rainbows. Having recently been shown the true scale of his own powers and the destruction he's capable of, Mark goes into Season 2 with the mindset that he must avoid becoming his father at all costs. So, to make sure he doesn't go down the wrong path, he clings to the value that he will not kill. But sometimes clinging to some values means letting others go, which is what Season 2 is all about. Through no real fault of his own, Mark stumbles into a one-way rivalry when he thwarts Angstrom Levy's plans in the first episode of the season. But following their first encounter, Angstrom sort of takes a back seat for most of the season while he quietly prepares his revenge. That gives Mark to slowly learn that he can't have everything he wants. He juggles college, a relationship, and saving the world before finally realizing he can't have it all. Sacrifices have to be made. And it's good he realizes this, because when it comes time to meet Angstrom Levy, he once again won't be able to have his cake and eat it too. This is
Even
because
more
Angstrom
so for a
challenges his
hero.
values as a dilemma antagonist. A dilemma antagonist will give the protagonist two mutually exclusive choices. By choosing one thing, a protagonist actively surrenders the other option. This is significant because
The
it gives a better look
problem.
into what matters to a character most. But the key is mutual exclusivity. If a character can somehow finesse his way into having both, then the dilemma fails. So when Angstrom Levy threatens Mark's family, he forces Mark to decide between his loved ones and his moral code. Like a mirror antagonist, a dilemma antagonist also has to be quite capable. And though he's no Viltrum, Levy is not a laughing matter. So when he invades Mark's home and holds Debbie and Oliver captive, Mark can't just punch his way out of the situation, especially when he's balancing Angstrom's life in the equation too. To get at this with his family safe and his morals intact would require a level of skill that Mark just simply doesn't have. So instead, he'll have to make a choice. Seeing the damage
Which it
Angstrom
does
did to his
later
mom,
on, to
Mark
be
finally
fair.
decides to stop holding back. But there's a key quote from Angstrom that helps Mark make up his mind. He tells Mark that this doesn't end until he and his family are dead. This is what sets Mark over the edge. This choice, either his family or Angstrom, are all he needs to hear. He finally gets a hold of Angstrom and lets loose, giving us flashes of his father that he was avoiding all season
How
long.
he serves
Angstrom actually
sense.
survives this beatdown, but for all intents and purposes, Mark kills him. He breaks his moral code, putting his family over everything else. I just want to clarify that Angstrom didn't
It is very interesting to see what happens when a hero, I don't know if corrupt is the right thing, but a hero is genuinely changed because of a villain. Those are always interesting stories to take, and does it pretty well, to be fair. However, it does retrospectively, like, worsen Mark's character to a degree, but more on that on a different video.
I apply to villains that can't be beat without giving something up. Obviously, Angstrom went there with the sole intention of defeating Mark, but in Mark's point of view, this came as a dilemma because he had to sacrifice his morals. After the beatdown, Mark reflects on himself with shame, which feels like a mirror moment, but I think at the heart of what Angstrom reveals is Mark's values rather than his flaws. We saw push come to shove, and we knew Mark had to make a choice, and so he did. We, the audience, leave this fight with a better understanding of Mark than we had before, which is what I think makes Angstrom a perfect dilemma antagonist. So what about Angstrom Part 2? Somehow, someway, Angstrom survived and was surgically repaired, which is definitely an interesting choice by the writers. He goes back to work in the shadows and doesn't return until late season 3. This time, he unleashes an army of alternate dimension Marks who wreak havoc across the globe. These alternate Marks might seem like mirrors of our protagonist because they are Mark in a different context, right? I wouldn't say so. Just because they're Mark Graysons doesn't mean they're our Mark Grayson, and their wrongdoings aren't his. Unlike them, our Mark made the choice to defy his father in season 1. He is inherently different. So, all that these other Invincibles really do is serve as obstacles for Mark and the other heroes, and Mark just defeats them without learning anything about himself or his strength. Then he finally meets Angstrom again.
No dilemma,
Angstrom puts up
no
a
mirror.
pathetic fight, and Mark once again gets him in his grasp. We see hesitation, but with encouragement from Oliver, Mark knows what he has to do. After all the regret
Did he
that came
need
from killing Angstrom the first
encouragement,
time,
though?
here we see Mark willing to double down and take Angstrom's life
Yeah,
with full
that's a bit different. He does it anyway. He's going to do it anyways without Oliver. But the presence of Oliver here makes this scene so much worse in the show because it shows that Mark is still hesitating, that he hasn't learned, which kind of is a bad character point here for Mark. But I think that's more of the animator's fault here rather than what the actual story was supposed to represent. So I'll let Mark off for this one.
And while Angstrom gets away, the point still stands. This altercation solidifies any doubts of Mark's values. We know what his priority is above everything else, his family.
And the
With
choice
two
is
types of
clear,
villains behind
obviously.
him, Mark has now learned about the depths of his powers and how he wishes to use them. He's learned about his flaws and established his values. What remains left is a simple test of ability.
Stand
An
ready for
obstacle.
my
With
arrival.
antagonists, they pose as a metaphorical hurdle for the protagonist to clear. But what I think separates a well-written obstacle from a poor one is the question they serve to answer. The question is not, are they strong enough? It's not, can they clear the hurdle? To properly inform a character's abilities, the obstacle must ask what it is that makes them strong. Not literally, though. When Conquest arrives on Earth, he cares about one thing, and it's certainly not Mark's character arc. It's his thirst for blood. Conquest's arrival was only hinted at a few times. When Mark fought the last Viltrumite to visit Earth, he quickly learned just how big the gap was between himself and his kind. For context, they gave him like an 18% chance of beating Anissa in combat, and he certainly did not beat her. So if Anissa was already a hurdle Mark couldn't clear, sending down one of the strongest Viltrumites in Conquest seems a little overkill. If Mark was to beat Conquest, he'd need to channel his strength in a way he never had before. He would need to learn what makes him strong. Conquest came to Earth wanting a good fight, and was quickly realizing he wasn't getting it. He threw Mark around like a rag doll, reminiscent of the way his dad handled him in season 1. Then he tried to liven Mark up. He offered some motivation, slaughtering innocent civilians as they barreled through cities. Finally, Conquest struck a nerve when he threatened Mark's family. So he kept going, telling Mark that they executed his father. This was starting to work. Then he got his hands on Oliver and nearly killed him. This really worked, bringing Mark to a whole new gear. Conquest was quickly realizing how to get what he wanted out of Mark. So when Eve joined the fight, Conquest made an opportunity to single her out and completely brutalized her. Now this was what brought Mark's complete strength out. He looked into the future and saw that Conquest wasn't making out of this fight alive. just like I looked into the future and saw that you're not leaving this video without subscribing. Anyway, with his brother in critical condition, his girlfriend on death's doorstep, and everyone's fate on the line, Mark was able to tap into the true root of his strength, his loved ones. So long as Mark has a loved one that needs protection, his spirit
And
is
people
in the final moments of the
fairy
fight.
tales
Mark made sure by
friendship
any
power
means
boosts.
necessary that Conquest could not take Mark's loved ones from him. You can break Mark's leg, you can break both his arms, but you can't break his spirit, not if his loved ones' lives are on the line. Through his relationships and his desire to protect, Mark had become invincible. In Season 1, Mark learned that being invincible means being able to destroy. In Season 2, he learned that saving his loved ones means needing to destroy. So, in Season 3, he destroyed without hesitation. Together, the three main villains sent Mark down a path that refined him into the truest version of himself, for better or worse. And if you know where that path goes next, I ask that you keep it out of the comments, just so it's fair for everyone who hasn't read the comic books. So that's a
very good video. Learned actually a lot from it. Like that matrix of obstacles, dilemma, mirror. Yeah, very good. And it is true. The good thing about antagonists is that there's one protagonist, but there can be multiple antagonists. And that's where stories do well, where not every antagonist can challenge the protagonist in a different way, which makes it so amusing. It's the whole idea of like rogues galleries with Spider-Man and Batman. Each one of their rogues challenge them in different ways, whether it's like their strategic ability, their detective ability, physical strength, maybe geek martial arts and combat ability. They all challenge different aspects of the hero, both on an external level and internal level, on our right to our content creator today, up where it's obstacles, they challenge dilemma or the mirror. It is truly amazing when villains are done right. They're extension of the protagonist's story, not just their own story as well, which makes everything so interlinked, which makes a better story and a better conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist. But I've yet for too much today. This was by Squam Populus. Very good content creator. I'm going to give him a subscribe because quite interesting. And that was the genius way Invincible used villains to write their story. Oh, let me show you a page. So yeah, very good video. But that was the video for today. Come to subscribe as always. And until next time, ciao.